Hello and welcome to Buildings of Tomorrow. My name is Jon Lester, and today we're talking about the innovation and digitalization of infrastructure. I'm really lucky today to be joined by two special guests. The first is Marjut Rautavaara. She's the Head of Product Management, Portfolio and Innovation for Digital Buildings at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. And Christian Waglechner. He is the Senior Real Estate Development Manager at CA Immo. Marjut, Christian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, today I'd like to talk about the digitalization of infrastructure. And there's a report that Siemens has recently produced talking about the space race and talking about how infrastructure stakeholders see the industry of construction, the infrastructure creation industry, let's call it, lagging a little bit from a digitalization perspective. And we know that there is a challenge all the time when we're talking about assets of a long-term investment, when we're talking about complex buildings, buildings that are different all the time. Everything is different. So I want to talk a little bit together with you about what's driving the market and how digitalization is really becoming a core part of that. And Christian, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay, because you're out there in the market talking with developers, driving the definition of what definition and investment looks like. What's the thought process for developers, for investors when they're starting to look at potential future projects? What's driving them, and how are they going about answering and defining the problems that they're challenged with today?
Well, first of all, I would like to share with you how developers are thinking. Developers are trying to create a building that is fulfilling certain criteria that are wrapped around the target that to create an investment that makes commercially sense. One of the decisions is, for example, materials. The building is to be seen as a long-lasting investment. That means the target is that the lifetime should, of course, not be shorter than the return of investment. Example, a standard office would create 5 to 6% income compared to the investment. That means in years, we speak about 16 to 20 years minimum that the material should last. Otherwise, a reinvestment has to be taken into account in the overall investment costs. Very simplified, but in a general understanding. That means there is no big understanding why people should invest too much money on something that is not proven, where there is no long-time experience, where people do not know, will they work in 5 years, in 10 years? Will they be already outdated? So what we are doing is we are saying that this is not what we have to do. Let's consider this in some sort of marketing budget. How about we use this budget pot? Marketing costs are approximately in the range of 0.6 to 1%. That means if we take into account that this can be considered as a part of the marketing investment, and we spend 30 to 50% of this budget to implement latest technologies or to upgrade what is already market standard, then we can implement things that are now up to date, latest technologies to allow us now and in future to do more things that we currently know. Following this argumentation, it is easy to agree and implement this.
Okay, that's a great insight, because I think especially a little bit later in the conversation when we start to talk about, what are some of the challenges about driving the speed and the scalability and the implementation, this is a huge challenge or a huge consideration that we need to take into account. Now, you mentioned this requirement for return on investment. Of course, that makes perfect sense from an investor's perspective. And you also described about setting these targets for a piece of infrastructure. What are some of the market drivers, the expectations from, if we take again the office example, from the tenants, from the building users? What are some of the functional and operational requirements that investors and developers are also seeing driven from the market?
Well, of course, the typical slogan is flexibility. Yeah, For example, if a company decides or is growing, if a company is optimizing the space, the surrounding needs to react on this. And with the digital technologies, where we can simply control light sources, ventilation, heating and cooling sources based by programming and not by cabling. This is allowing us a far more flexible surrounding that can immediately react on big changes in shrinking or increasing the tenant space.
Amazing. And here's where I'd really like to link to you, Marjut, because exactly what Christian mentioned then around flexibility, around digital solutions is where you and your team spend all of your time and all of your energy. The drivers in the market that you see, what are the big problems that you recognize technology and digitalization can address from your perspective, from the technology side of things?
Yeah. So we are hearing from the customers and the markets. I think there's the three key drivers that we are looking into. So obviously one is the sustainability, energy efficiency, which is ever more relevant. So that's number one driver at the moment. The second, which is linked to that, is really the performance of the buildings. So how can we run the buildings more efficiently, also from the, let's say, the maintenance cost perspective, not only from the energy perspective. And thirdly, then the performance, the experience in the buildings. Experience meaning comfort of the occupants, but also the safety and security of the occupants. And much of the technology exists. I mean, we've been doing all of these things for years now, having already quite good buildings. But now I think the game changer really is around the IoT, for example. So you can really connect a lot more data. Then we have the cloud technologies that really allow us to handle that data in scale, digital twins that really structure that data, that it is usable, then to run AI and algorithms, and as in terms of optimizing the buildings. So technology is there; it's no longer science fiction. But I think there's also some resistance still in the market to really adapt in scale, which we see.
Yeah, I understand. And I think this ties a little bit back to one of the topics that Christian mentioned before, that long-term investment, that ability or that willingness to take some risks, let's call it, and to make some decisions which are somehow outside the standard. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of that technology, some of the enabling topics that you just mentioned. But to do that, it'd be nice to link it a little bit to some of the challenges, Christian, you see in the market. So do you have a use case for us, an example of a recent project, customer discussion where that core driver of flexibility and the ability to adapt and operate efficiently was highlighted for you, where you said, "Hey, this is a great example of let's call it the challenge that we have."
Yeah. Uh, what we have implemented in our latest project is that we have taken this additional budget and we have implemented more intelligent sensors. They can measure light density, they can measure light color, they can measure the temperature, air humidity, they can measure CO2 level. That means all this package around the so-called comfort for the tenant. These sensors are not only preparing ourselves to control and steer it, but we can also measure it, collect the data, and learn from it. On one building, in one city, on the whole portfolio. That means on a long-term perspective, we want to collect the data and we want to learn from it. How our customers are using the building. What can we improve? How can we reduce energy consumption? How can we transfer this information even to the tenants, to the users, that they are part of this whole procedure? Maybe we should think about gamification, yeah? They will get the knowledge energy was reduced by, and this is then some sort of challenge. I'm better than my neighbor. What we have also implemented is, for example, we do no longer have analog light switches. Everybody is used to have this analog light switches, which is switching on the light in an office building connected by cable. What we have done is we did throw it to the basket and we have implemented digital controlling elements. With this single unit, we can control in one go. We can control the lights, we can control the sun blinds, we can control the airflow, the temperature, and the cooling in one single element. And in addition, you can connect with your mobile phone to this equipment, and you can steer and control everything from your desk directly without getting up and going 8 to 10 meters to steer and control it. So very comfortable for our end users, and this is one thing that we can communicate very easy. Something like energy reduction is connected to this, because if it is a digital thing, we can steer and we can control it. If there is nobody in the room, if the occupancy sensor says this area is not in use, let's lower everything, let's turn off the lights, let's lower the ventilation system, it has a huge impact in the energy consumption.
Understand. I love that example because it touches on so many topics that we've already talked about today. You mentioned three kind of key drivers that you hear from customers when you talk to them: sustainability, that flexibility and adaptability, and then the user experience. And I think that that example that Christian just touched on addresses all of these somehow. Delivering the right amount of light, the right color of light, the right amount of shading, energy delivered via heating, cooling, airflow, etc. Managing that so that we still find that sustainability, that energy efficiency aspect, collecting, and I think right at the start, Christian, you mentioned from an operator's perspective, controlling and understanding and gaining transparency on that one building, on all the buildings in a city and the whole portfolio. So this benchmarking ability and operation across a broad portfolio of buildings. So, Maya, give us a quick summary of that. We talked about so many different aspects then in the example that Christian brought to us for this use case. What are some of the key technologies that enable this ability to address those three key use cases, enable this benchmarking and operation across a full fleet of sites, and also linking to the user and enabling this gamification, this understanding, this insight into what's happening in the building? What are some of the things that can make that possible?
Yeah, so one of the things that really is close to my heart these days is actually when you look into, for example, this example, you heard many stakeholders in that ecosystem of a use case. So you have the tenant, you have the building owner, you have the equipment providers who provide the systems, and you have someone who is actually managing the operations, the facilities. Now, how can we enable that collaboration and these use cases across all of those? That is really made possible through the rise of the digital platforms that really bring the data together and allow different use cases, different participants then to interact with the data and create this kind of like interactions with each other as well. So the feedback from the tenant comes to the facility manager, who then does something that has an impact on the system. And then there is further opportunities by automating this chain of things. So maybe the feedback from tenant can be expressed not only by providing the feedback manually, but also by the behavior. You know that if they are switching the lights or adjusting the lights, there's something wrong in that. The system should be able to read it and provide that information that yes, in this room there is some issue, but the system could also analyze what is the root cause of this issue and autonomously then do something about it, adjust to that. I think this is still a little bit further down the road in the future. I think there is not yet a lot of trust in the, let's say, the building environment to allow these controls to become autonomous. There still needs to be that human in the control loop. But we see that in the areas like in the energy efficiency, managing the schedules in the buildings, this starts to become a more commonplace.
You understand. And I think that's, that links us to the next topic and where I'd like to close our discussion today and brings us back around this conversation that you started, Christian, at the start, around the recognition that when we try things that are new, when we look to change the norm from the past to embrace the future capabilities, there is somehow a sticking point here. Between what we're able to do technology-wise and what we're willing to invest in and drive for from an industry perspective. So I wanted to quickly touch on that with both of you. We have this challenge from an investor perspective. There is risk that comes with this when you're investing in a building that must last, that must return on that investment within that 20 years and push through and last as a long-term investment and asset. And then we have the ability and the functionality and the new technologies and knowledge that we have, Marjut, and we want to bring this into the world and make this part of the norm. So an open question, and I'll start firstly with you, Christian. What do we do about this? What's the next step as an industry? How do we speed this up and help together as a collective group of stakeholders move past some of these sticking points?
I would divide it into 2 points. I think there are two main reasons that are currently driving these innovations on the market. One thing is comfort, to make things, and the second is to make things simple and cost saving. Comfort as a slogan will bring us new ways how we can use and control things and buildings. And the second, cost saving and make it simple, will bring far bigger changes, but it will take longer, as we already heard. Yeah. Connected to this artificial intelligence, autonomous buildings connected with the digital twin that we want to establish. I think this needs to become in stages. Let's compare it to the autonomous driving. Yeah, if we have a look over the fence, how other industries are developing themselves, they're making it into stages to allow the customer not to have it too complicated in their understanding. So if we say, okay, let's make some comfort and let's connect it with the next stage of autonomous behavior, they are more willing to accept this. I think what is currently happening is that the industry in certain areas is too fast for the market. They are it is very hard to create this understanding. So if it is done step by step, then I think it is very easy to come to the stage of acceptance. Yeah, and once you are there, it is very easy then to, in the next project, that you say already, this is nothing new. This is not a new technology. This is not a risk. We are already at the stage of market standard, and in the next step, we can do something in addition and in addition.
Understand. I think it's a good insight from, let's say, from the market perspective. And the same question to you, Marjut. Knowing that this technology is here and developing and moving quickly, what are some of the things that we can do to help break through some of these barriers and cover some of these hurdles?
Yeah, my thoughts are a lot on the same lines as Christian's here. So simplification of things. So reducing that complexity that is required to bring these different systems together and enable these different use cases and the collaborations on top. So this is the key. So how to make it simple? Simple makes it more affordable. And then the second aspect I would bring outside of the technology, which is new ways of collaborating. So also for us technology providers to collaborate with those customers and customers willing to also to experience and experiment the new technologies with us, then will help us to get into that, what that Christian mentioned, these next steps of then driving the adoption on the wider scale. But we need to gain that experience so that we can then again make things more simple. And the collaboration across the industry, which means that also the systems become more interoperable out of the box so that you can really create those use cases with the lesser of engineering then going forward. So I think with these types of new ways of working, collaborating, we can actually make the difference in the industry.
Yeah, amazing. And from previous discussions we had on this show and also discussions we see in the industry, I think collaboration is really that key. It's no longer a group of people somewhere in a building creating a solution, a service, an offering, and sending it out into the world. It's this co-collaboration, this co-creation, and this constant conversation, like we're having today, almost to understand the challenges from both sides of the table and finding the linking points and those simple steps to get us there step by step. Christian, Marjut, thank you so much. We've only scratched the surface, but anyhow, a really interesting conversation. So a huge thank you to both of you for your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
And a huge thank you to everyone that is out there listening as well. If you would like to learn a little bit more and dive into a little bit more detail, as I mentioned at the start, there is a report that has been released called The New Space Race that's focused around the pivotal role of data, digitalization in the transformation of infrastructure. And it looks at some of these challenges, things like climate change and the expectations from the market and how that really affects buildings and the energy systems, and how digitalization is some of the core enablers for the next steps for us. So check that out. Go out and search for a new space race by Siemens. But apart from that, look out for our new episodes, and really also reach out to Marjut and Christian on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll find them there, and ask and continue the conversation there. But until then, we thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.